once we realize that the stories we tell ourselves impact us and impact our physiology and impact the state of being that we're in, we're able to then go in and either change those stories or work those stories or release some of that tension from those stories.
Welcome to America's Healthiest City on ESPN Richmond 106.1, part of the Mike King Biz Media Network. You can catch us here every Thursday at 6 a.m. And if you check us out on americashealthiestcity.com, you can see our ideas board and learn what it takes to become an ambassador. We're looking for people who represent businesses, nonprofits, academic institutions, and government agencies that want to see us make RVA, the entire region, the healthiest in the nation by 2033. We cannot do it alone. We must do it together. It takes everybody's action. So please check out americashealthiestcity.com. Please also check us out on Instagram at America's Healthiest City and the same on LinkedIn. Today we have in the studio Dave Robinson, the founder, owner, and coach behind Work Your Stories. We're going to talk about the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we hear in our head from others who've not said those things, and we're going to talk about how we can reframe those things so that we can live a healthier, happier life as individuals and project more of that positivity into the world. So without further ado, Dave, thanks for joining me in the studio today. This is really great.
Thanks for having me, Will. Appreciate you.
I'm excited for our conversation. I want to start with the same question I ask everybody. Are you native to Richmond, or did you move here? And if so, what brought you to the community?
I was 6 months old, so I say I'm a native.
I think that,
yeah, that counts.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
That counts. Been here for 35, almost 36 years. Had a couple stints elsewhere, but outside of college and a little trip to Mexico right before COVID hit. So that'll be a fun story to potentially get into, maybe not. But yeah, I've been here, love the city, and I imagine I'll be here for a long time.
Great. Well, I'm excited to learn more about your story. We're talking about stories today, and there are a couple of different types of stories. Before we get into kind of the story work part of it, let's back up and talk about what brought you to the work that you're doing. So I understand you went to James Madison University. Mm-hmm. You developed a big interest in physical fitness, coaching, and just, I guess, imagine for yourself. Tell us a little bit about that and you know what happened when you left college.
Yeah, so I actually went to college to become a high school history teacher.
Okay.
And I realized a couple weeks before I graduated, as I'm applying to master's programs, that I didn't want to be the teacher that just wanted to have their summers off and coach high school soccer. You know, I wanted to impart a different type of knowledge. So I really fell into the strength and conditioning world. It was something that I loved to do personally. I had done a ton of research on. In college, I worked at the library very intentionally so I can sneak off and look at PubMed articles and get into all the different books and journals and whatnot. But I actually became a strength and conditioning coach at the University of Richmond right out of college. And so I worked with football, men's soccer, women's soccer, field hockey, lacrosse, loved it. But I found that I was spending way too much time in the gym, not seeing the sunshine, not wanting to get my own physical training in because I was spending so much time doing it for other people. So seeking flexibility of time and income, I got into financial planning, which I did for 6 years. I didn't ever intend to leave that industry, to be honest with you, but I realized that deep down in my gut and deep down in my soul, I could rationalize it with my head. I could feel like I loved it with my heart, but in here, I knew that it wasn't for me and that I was going to be living a B- to B+ life if I continued down that trajectory. So I got back into coaching, and then using the methodology of story work, I helped to work my own stories and found that to be the through line between everything else. And so right after COVID hit, when everything went virtual, that's when I decided to go all in on story work. And yeah, that's all I do.
So I'm noticing a common thread here. You start with individual, physical fitness, and you move to individual, personal financial success, and then moving into just individual success. Sounds like you like helping people. What has been the motivation for working with people?
Impact. And, I define impact personally as the ripples we create and send out into our world. And at first I went from teaching to coaching to advising to back to coaching, and I always knew I wanted to be in the service industry. I just didn't know exactly what I wanted to teach or coach or advise on. And until I found story work, it was, fitness and then health. And I still sprinkle in some of that stuff, but it's the vast majority of what I do is all when it comes to the stories and the mental emotional aspect of things. But I wanted to make an impact, and I couldn't see myself just selling refrigerators or working in a warehouse or anything like that. I wanted to feel like I was making a difference in some capacity.
So you made some intentional decisions. You disrupted your life. You took a risk. How did that feel? What pushed you over the edge to do those things? I know you said that your gut kind of told you, but was there some other motivator, or was there something that said, screw the risk, this is worth it?
A couple times, yeah. One time I got bit by a spider, and I was in the hospital for a couple of days, and it wasn't ever a oh, Dave's going to die type scenario, but they were trying to figure stuff out. I had a really bad infection. Like I said, I was in for 2 nights, 3 days, and I had a come to Jesus moment, so to speak, where it was 12:30, 1 a.m. Saturday. It turned to Sunday, and I had a thought of like, oh, okay, well, today's Sunday. I'm supposed to get released. Tomorrow's Monday. That means I'm going to have to go back to work. Maybe I'll just stay here. And it was like, download instantaneously of, dude, you'd rather stay in the hospital another day than go back and work at your own firm doing something that you say you love and that you really wanted to do forever. And that was a real, okay, I'm going to take a risk moment, because I knew I had to get out, because it wasn't it wasn't something that I could see myself doing forever from that instant on, because I knew there was other things for me. The second big risk was moving to Mexico to open a health and wellness retreat with a prior business partner. And we had an opportunity to move 6 hours south of Cancun, just north of the Belize border on the Yucatan Peninsula. Had a little town of 1,500 people that we bought a compound in and put a down payment on this hotel, basically. And it was next to this sacred lagoon and this gorgeous Mayan jungle, and everything was really amazing, except our timing. So we moved down there on March 2nd of 2020.
Oh.
Yeah. And so borders were closed 2 weeks later. We had to make a decision that, looking back on, I might have made a different decision. And ultimately, with the knowledge that we had at the time, it was the right call to move back. And I always like to say you can collect the dots and then connect the dots. And looking back, I see all the ways and reasons why I had to go through the things that I went through and make the decisions I made to lead me to all the best stuff in my life.
I've been to Mexico twice in the last 14 months. It's an amazing place. There's something special about that down there, but it doesn't beat Richmond.
No.
So let's talk about Richmond a little bit. So, we'll talk about Richmond at the end. Let's talk about getting into storywork. So you had to have your first client at some point.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? How it felt to have that first client, and how that led you to grow into the coach you are today?
Yeah, the first actual storywork thing that I did was I gave a free talk at a outdoor, day-long retreat just outside of Richmond. It was in Hanover, probably in May of 2020. So this was kind of everybody's getting together. We're 6 feet apart, and everybody's outside, but it was a combination of yoga and some fitness and some ice therapy, like ice baths, and this thing called storywork. Right? And so it was a wellness community event. Probably 30 people there, mostly women. I offered a free session to everybody. 2 people took me up on it. And one of those individuals ended up becoming my first client. And actually, her husband opened a addiction recovery center here in town called Starfish Recovery. And I went in and did a couple sessions with them from a group standpoint. Big impact. They loved it. And they invited me in to work with all of their intensive patients one-on-one from that point on. And so I spent probably 250 of my first 500 sessions in a very, very complex and, shall we call it, gnarly environment of folks coming in and out of bond, in and out of jail. Some of them wanted to be there, some of them didn't. But I was able to really dive off the deep end when it came to a lot of those hurt, heavy, haunted stories, and learn a lot and experiment a lot and make a big difference for the folks that were ready to receive that type of work. Now I don't do a ton of the addiction recovery stuff, but I work all types of stories, past, present, future.
Yeah, we've had a couple of folks in, Angela Patton from Girls for Change, who's focused on, bringing girls into the jail to dance with their dads, which is a special moment, or other folks who work in the addiction space. So those are definitely important areas to focus our energy. You are listening to America's Healthiest City on ESPN Richmond 106.1, part of the Mike King Biz Media Network. Today we have Dave Robinson, the founder, owner, and coach at Work Your Stories, we're talking about mental health and just a general narrative that we carry around in our head and how we fix that. I want to talk with you, Dave, a little bit more about this idea of story work. I understand that you have now completed over 1,000 sessions of story work with your clients. Tell us a little bit about how it took you almost 3 years to do that, right? Mm-hmm. Tell us how that's been and how's it go? How's story work?
Yeah, great question. So it is really key for us to get the stories that we tell ourselves down out of our heads and then onto the screen or onto paper, right? When I say write it down, 99% of my work is virtual, so it's done via Zoom and a Google Doc. But either writing down or typing out the stories is the first key step. And if you can title something and get it onto the page or onto paper, that's the biggest key and the biggest thing to focus on, because it takes us from being in the story to now having some separation and observing the story. And those are two totally different things. So once we get that story written down or typed out, then we're able to systematically and strategically downshift into that parasympathetic nervous system state, that rest and relax state, whereas before oftentimes we're very stressed out or in that fight or flight state when it comes to these particular stories. And so we read the story out loud, we slow down the pace of speech when it comes to that particular read, we add in some rhythmic strategic breaths, and those breaths are very downshifting in nature, where the inhale is big and the exhale is long, and that allows us to pull down again into that rest and relax state. And then we go in and we change the words. And it's very different from therapy. It's very different from counseling. It is very different from even a lot of coaching methodologies, because we're taking it many steps further beyond just talking about how we're feeling or even journaling or just writing stuff down. We're actually methodically downshifting from stressed to relaxed. And in that state, our bodies can process emotions, our bodies and brains can store memories properly. Our cells or self can actually heal. So it is a very profound and simple yet effective way of dealing with either stuff from the past that we don't want to think about often anymore, or present day realities that we might need changing, or even architecting the reality that we actually want for ourselves in the future.
I'm really interested in this physiology component.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like there's a direct linkage between the state of our body and the ability for our mind to consume information, process it, synthesize it, adopt it as a reality. Can you talk a little bit about why this service is needed? What do we carry around with us? What motivates people to come into this space?
We all use words, right? We all think and speak. And ultimately, we're either using categories of words that are creating conflict internally or externally, or we are using patterns and categories of words that are doing the opposite of that, which is actually architecting what we want for ourselves. And so we all have belief systems. We all have influences. We're all nourished in some capacity by what we read or hear or see or watch or listen to or whatever it may be. And so we are always having an outside influence and an inside influence on the stories that we tell ourselves. And so we also all have an inner critic. We have a inner bully, shall we say. And once we realize that inner critic is not us, which is very key, it's not coming from the soul with a capital S or the self with a capital S. It's often an outside voice, or as I like to call it, it's the dark wolf in the light wolf, dark wolf conversation. And so once we realize that the stories we tell ourselves impact us and impact our physiology and impact the state of being that we're in, we're able to then go in and either change those stories or work those stories or release some of that tension from those stories. We've also all been through hurtful experiences, and some folks have even been through haunting or traumatic experiences. And so we carry a lot of those negative energies with us, and those are heavy.
I can imagine that a lot of your work revolves around money. Money controls a lot of our lives. And as I think about that, and as I think about the improvement that any individual can see through story work, I can only imagine that their financial lives are likely improved as a result. Can you talk about, maybe not just financial, but some of the impact that you've seen, some of the results that you've seen with individual clients?
Yeah, I mean, my youngest client has been 8 years old. My oldest client is 82. Um, I had for I mean, you're the marketing guy and the kind of content creation, person, and people have always asked, "What's your niche?" And I was like, everybody, because we all have stories, right? And so, um, from addiction recovery to just that negative self-talk that is so pervasive in people's lives, and imposter syndrome, um, having the identity of someone who fails, or having the identity of someone who's not worthy, people who don't love themselves, people who maybe are doing great but don't know what they don't know, and might have blind spots that they might not be aware of. I mean, all of these types of situations are different types of clients that I could put a name to, even that I've just worked with recently. So lots of different types of people. I would say that many prevailing themes, if someone were to come to me, 50% of people know exactly why they're there. And they have had an experience in their past, or two or three or whatever, that still is with them, and that they think about before they go to bed, or that they've been consciously suppressing or unconsciously repressing, and they don't want it there anymore. And I think that's why, and how this work was originally developed, is to get those stories up and out, and to provide that freedom and clarity of thought, and that feeling of lightness. I think the other 50% or so of people who come to me are stuck. They're maybe depressed, maybe they're anxious, maybe they just have, that feeling of apathy, and, they don't really know why. And then that means that I get to go in with a scalpel and a flashlight and try to find them.
So I'll tell just a quick personal story. Just a couple of months after you started your business, I was with a friend of mine on Memorial Day, and I found out that who I thought was my father wasn't my biological father. And at that moment, I think people around me were like, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I remember thinking to myself, "Well, there's nothing I can do except reframe my origin story." And I thought that at that moment it was really profound, because I got to realize that there's a lot of stories that have been told in prior to technology that weren't true. I think society has this habit of holding up the facade for other folks, and I'm curious. I've talked about this with other guests on this show. I want to know what you think about the facade, the sort of the collective facade, the individual facade, and how that just really doesn't serve us.
I mean, you hear all the time, social media is a highlight reel, right? And I think it's really important to understand too that a lot of the stories that we carry aren't ours to carry. Right? There's an ancestral aspect to these stories, where you can call it epigenetics, you can call it whatever you want, but the reality is that there's a reason for a lot of things. We might not always know the reason, but if we are curious, if we can dig into some of those aspects, we might be able to understand behavior a little bit differently, and provide a different perspective. We can't go back in time and change things, but we can change our perception to the things we've experienced. And things might not excuse certain behaviors, but it might give us an explanation for certain behaviors when it comes to our parents or grandparents or great grandparents or whatever it may be. And so I think all of us want to portray the success, or portray, yeah, I'm happy, things are good, and inside they might not be feeling that. There might be some tension. There might be some again, that feeling, right? And ultimately, it comes down, in my professional and personal opinion, to the stories that we are telling ourselves on a regular basis.
So we want to get everybody who's listening to sign up for your coaching and to leverage your gift. But I wanted to see if you might share just one thing with our listeners today, and that is sort of that knee-jerk reaction that happens when we receive information that our endorphins fire, and we kind of feel this heat in our body, and maybe some anxiety. And that's often where the story, emerges or restarts, and kind of all that negativity comes around. What advice can you give for folks who are listening about that moment that they might consider thinking about to try to stop that from happening?
Yeah, breathe. Our breath drives our physiology, and it can be so simple because it's something that is part of the autonomic nervous system, meaning we don't have to think to do it, but we can hijack that or take that over at any time consciously. And so there's a great Viktor Frankl quote that I love. He wrote Man's Search for Meaning, and it says, in between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response, and our response lies our growth and our freedom. I think a lot of the personal development work that people do, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, whatever it may be. It's to open up that space between stimulus, what happens to us, and response, how we actually respond. And in that space, in that wedge, you can always breathe. And if you breathe with your nose and make that exhale longer than your inhale, pulls us down into that rest and relax. And so before you respond, take a big breath, right? And maybe write down the thing that you're thinking, and you'll find that you'll have a little bit more space and a little bit more clarity in that moment.
Sounds like great advice and something that I can take. I just having a conversation with my wife last night. I think I have anger management problems. She's like, yeah. Most people wouldn't know it, but we all have flaws. You are listening to America's Healthiest City on ESPN Richmond 106.1, part of the Mike King Biz Media Network. I invite you to visit americashealthiestcity.com and check out the ideas board. It's a place where anybody can leave ideas, big or small, that will impact the health of our collective health of our community, and hopefully inspire other folks to take those ideas and run with them. Other folks can comment on those ideas, and we bring the ideas board out into the public so that other people can leave those ideas in a live setting. So please check that out. We are on ESPN, and we do this every week at 6 a.m., and we're just so excited to have a year under our belt. We've done over 45 interviews, and today we're just really excited to have Dave Robinson, the coach, founder, and owner of Work Your Stories. We're talking about the stories that we carry around and our ability to reshape those stories to live a better life. I want to shift our conversation a little bit more toward Richmond. Thank you so much for giving that wonderful tip to our listeners. And let's talk about some ideas that you might have and how you imagine the future of life in Richmond. If everybody were to take on storywork, and leverage that for their life, what do you see happening, and how do we get more people to tune into this type of thing?
One of my favorite affirmations, my personal favorite, is I love myself. My second favorite and most commonly shared is better me, better everyone. Better me, better everyone. And I shared my definition of impact earlier, which was the ripples we create and send out into our world. And so I believe that if we all take it upon ourselves to do that inner work and face our, the demons in the cave, so to speak, but just work through the things that we know deep down that we really need to work through, then that permeates into the rest of the culture. That spreads out a ripple into the family unit, and spreads out a ripple into the work environment, spreads out a ripple into the community. And so if all of us can take on that better me, better everyone mindset, then we'll be pouring from a full cup, and that cup can keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
So I'm curious what you think about part of the motivation for America's Healthiest City is the knowledge that some people don't trust the future. They don't trust the future because of what's happened in the past. Richmond certainly, as a community, has let folks down in time. And so I wonder, do you think that there's an opportunity to leverage story work for a community? Can RVA rethink, reimagine who we are and where we're going? Because that's what we're trying to do with America's Healthiest City. And, we've been doing it for a year. I can't say that we've moved the needle too much, but I'm convinced if we keep going and incorporate more things, we can do this. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on this.
I mean, if you move the needle 1%, that's an entirely different trajectory, a year, 5 years, 10 years, 100 years down the road, and hey, like, I was a history major, right? This was a very historic city, and it has its good history and its very negative, bad history. And I think that, again, we can't go back in time and change any of that stuff, but we can change both our perception looking backwards. We can change our state now, our physiology now, as we relate to the city and the culture and the history, and we can certainly change the trajectory moving forward. And how we do that, I think, again, it comes down to us all taking steps that we can and doing the things that we're good at and confident in order to make those improvements. Everybody's got a cause that's special and near and dear to their heart. And I think that we are doing a disservice to ourselves and our community if we try to go against that inner knowing or that cause that is really special to us. If we try to help everything and everybody, right, we're not going to be in the best position to do so. And so, for you, maybe it's the water, right? For me, I did a bunch of work a number of years ago with a child cancer support organization in town called the Connors Heroes Foundation. That was something that's really near and dear to me. And then the addiction recovery community as well. I don't have family members, but my best friend since I was 8 years old, lived 5 houses down and over a street, is still dealing with substance abuse. And so that's something that I definitely, it pulls up the heartstrings, and it's something that I continue to find ways to give back on with. And so connect with people, connect with causes that are important to you, and we're able to then each change the trajectory a little bit. And again, if we are all changing trajectories and making those positive steps, then it's going to happen.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't tap into your coaching brain from a physical performance standpoint, because I think this is important, and this shows about social determinants and community health, not always about individual health, but you said it, if we can be better us, we can be better for everybody else. Tell us a little bit about your view on the importance of being physically fit and exercise in relation to story work and self-improvement.
I mean, your health is your wealth. Your health is everything. I've figured that out a couple times when I, was hooked up to all kinds of tubes and cords and stuff like that after getting bit by a spider. I think a lot of us saw that during the last 3 or 4 years, given the global situation we were in. I compare Richmond to the city of Austin, Texas. I like to call Richmond the Austin of the East. Austin is a very, very active and fit city, and they have, I thought it was a river. It's not a river. It's actually a big lake that kind of runs right in front of the downtown, but it's very similar in style, I think, to Richmond. And we all need to go outside more. We all need to get sunshine and breathe fresh air and drink clean water and eat good food and do the things that we know we need to do. And I think from a very simplistic standpoint, it's go get more steps in, right? Go walk more. Like, it can be easy. And what if it was easy? What if it was easy to get fit or to get healthier or to take back control of your physiology? You do that at a micro level with your breath. You could do that at a macro level through moving your body through space and time a little bit more often, a little bit better. We all can look at a certain meal and say, yeah, I probably shouldn't eat that, or I probably shouldn't eat that all day, every day. I probably could eat something a little bit different. And we just start making it more of those decisions and less of the ones that we know are going to affect us negatively as time goes on. And again, it helps to elevate, like the tide raises all boats. So we've got a great city for outdoor movement. North Bank Buttermilk Trail is awesome. A lot of our parks are awesome. James River Trail System's awesome. Pocahontas State Park's awesome. The beach is 2 hours east. The mountains are 2 hours west. There's a lot of flexibility when it comes to being active in town. And it doesn't need to be in a gym. It doesn't need to be intense. You can just go outside.
I appreciate that. So with a couple minutes left, I just want to give you the opportunity, if you would, who's somebody we should bring into the studio and interview who's making a difference in the community and inspiring others to be healthier?
His name is Vincent Vu. Vincent Vu. This gentleman is a immigrant from Vietnam, came over to the States a while ago, I think in the late 90s. But he has started a company, and it's founded in 2017 or 2018. It's called Kinnis Barefoot. Kinnis Barefoot, K-I-N-I-S. And Vincent makes barefoot shoes, but shoes that are flat, that allow your feet and toes to expand, that allow you to actually feel the ground, that allow for natural movement and natural gait. They look cool, they're comfortable, they're stylish. But now what he's focused on is adding an AI element to this, and Kinnis has become a health tech company. And so he's working with a couple of different categories of people. He's working with the elderly to help have sensors in the shoes that can predict falls, which is the leading cause of death of elderly people from an accident standpoint. And he's also working with recreational and elite athletes to help them prevent and pre-diagnose potential injuries based on their movement patterns. And it's a super, super cool company. He's an incredible individual. I'd be happy to link you two up.
Yeah. I'd be excited to get Vincent in here. I actually have an employee who sings praises about his shoes. So that's
awesome.
Exciting.
Awesome.
All right. So just a few seconds left. Tell folks how they can find you out there.
Yeah, I'm at workyourstories.com online, and I'm on Instagram at daverobinson.coach. So workyourstories.com and daverobinson.coach.
This was America's Healthiest City on ESPN Richmond 106.1, part of the Mike King Biz Media Network. Catch us every Thursday at 6 a.m. Find us online at americashealthiestcity.com. Catch you next time.